We'll start off with this old type of connector. This is the BNC connector. You can see that is a bayonet nail Concealman connector. You can see that this is a socket of the BNC connector, and there are two lugs. One lug is here, another lug is seen here. Lugs are small projections on connectors meant for going into the slots on the plugs. You can see the lug here. There will be another lug 180 degrees opposite to that also here. So these two lugs are meant to fix to two corresponding slots in the plug. This is a socket, BNC socket, and you can put the BNC plug over that and tighten it. The range of frequency which will be covered by this is up to 2 gigahertz, and they say that this type of connector can take up to 500 volts of RF voltage. It is also used for video connections, both video and RF connections. This is an old handy. This is a VHF handy which is almost or a little more than quarter century old. It's not functional now, and I don't have the rubber duck antenna which used to be connected here, which will have a plug, BNC plug at the tip. Sometimes we used to use this connected to an external antenna also, which will have, the cable will have the corresponding BNC plug over there. If a BNC plug is not there, you'll have to have an adapter from the PL259 plug to connect it to BNC. But I used to use an external antenna also with a BNC plug for this radio. But those are not being used now because this is not functional, very old. This is an SMA socket. SMA means sub-miniature version A, SMA socket. This is an advancement over the BNC connector. While BNC connectors were introduced in 1940s, this was introduced in 1960s. And upper frequency range mentioned for BNC connector was 2 gigahertz. Initially when this was designed, the upper frequency mentioned was 12 gigahertz. Later it was increased to 18 gigahertz and even 26.5 gigahertz. There are even certain variants which can go even up to 40 gigahertz. So this is meant for higher frequency applications. And now most of the handheld devices like dual band radios are coming with similar connectors. That is the SMA connector. This is a threaded type of connector. It doesn't have that lugs like the previous BNC socket. BNC also, there is a TNC variety, that is threaded variety of BNC connectors also there. This is not that, this is SMA connector. Sub-miniature version A connector this is the socket part of it. This is the plug part of it. You can see that there is a projection inside, and this is also screw type connector. This is the plug part of the SMA circuit. Both these can go together, can be screwed together to form a connection. So this will be an SMA connection, and this is how you can attach a SMA connector. This is the plug and this one is the socket. So socket will be there on the radio, just like the handheld radio which I had shown earlier. And suppose your antenna is not compatible or having, most of my antennas have PL259 plugs. So if you want to have that, you can use this adapter cable. This is an adapter cable. You have SMA plug at one end and other end shows the SO239 or socket of the formerly this was known as UHF connector, but now it is known as SO239 connector. There are different variants. This one has an outer conductor and an inner also, and there is a dielectric insulator in between, and this adapter is meant for smaller type of cable. Here you can see a heat shrink. This is a crimping type of connector. The inner conductor has been pushed inside and fixed with the screw mechanism, and heat shrink has been inserted over it, and this is stable. So this is SO239 connector, and you can see that there are multiple spokes here and notches also. Multiple notches are there to fit into the PL259 plug, and this is an adapter cable for SMA to SO239. This is a standalone chassis mount SO239 connector. You can see there is an inner conductor and outer conductor, and a flange is there. There are 4 holes meant for mounting with screws onto the chassis, and this is a place where you connect the inner conductor from the coaxial cable. Outer conductor can be soldered here, the outer part of the SO239. This SO239 also has multiple spokes or notches. There are other variants of SO239 connectors also. This one is on the back of my SWR meter. You can see that there are only 4 notches. Multiple notches are not there. 4 notches only. So there are versions with multiple notches and just 4 notches. This is the PL259 plug, inner conductor, outer conductor. There are 2 spikes over here which will go into 2 of the notches of SO239 connector. But what I found is that when you try to screw it into SO239 with only 4 notches, there is likely to be some mismatch because you might thread it wrongly. But if you are using it for a SO239 connector with multiple notches, it is likely to go in better. I had an instance where the inner conductor of the SO239 on my SWR meter got splayed, and there was loose contact showing high SWR. Another reason for such instance is if there is a bulging portion of the solder here. So we are supposed to smoothen it out so that the solder does not form a bulb at the tip of the PL259 plug. If it is there, this can damage the SO239 connector. This is how the dismantled crimping type of connector will look. The inner part and the outer sheath which will go. The sheath of the coaxial cable will go in between these two like this, so that it need only be tightened. You need not solder the coaxial sheath onto this, and you can tighten this and the sheath becomes tight inside. So it avoids soldering of the outer sheath of the coaxial cable onto the PL259 plug, because it is rather difficult, especially for me, to solder it here, because this is a thick metal and it will conduct away the heat of the soldering iron. Naturally, I'll need much more powerful soldering iron than the ones which I usually have. This sheath is bigger. You can see this sheath is bigger compared to this one. You can see the difference. This is bigger. This is meant for thicker cables like RG213, and this is for a thinner cable. This is another interesting type of SO239. This is known as barrel connector. Both sides are SO239 of this barrel connector. It is used when you want to join two cables with PL259 terminations. Like this is one PL259 termination. You can screw it here. And suppose you have another one with the PL259 termination, you can screw it here also. So this becomes a secure connection between two cables with PL259 connections. I had used this when I wanted to extend my antenna cable. For example, I started off with a 10 meter, and when I elevated the antenna, I wanted to keep it at higher height. Then I used another 10-meter cable to connect it with this barrel connector. This is known as SO239 barrel connector. These two are PL259 plugs. Then there are other types of connectors like N connector and C connector, but I do not have samples of them.